this recording going. Make sure that. Okay. So chapter 10 is going to be two-part. We'll start today and then we'll finish out tomorrow. Because it's quite extensive. You will be doing your mock interviews starting next week. And I know some people even may do it a bit sooner, and that's fine. So we wanted to spend some time talking about interviewing. Now, let me ask a very obvious question. Is there anyone out there that just hates interviewing? I mean, some people may like it because they say, hey, yeah. And the church said amen, right? Who nobody likes it. It's like the worst first dates ever, where you have to go and just tell this complete stranger about yourself and they're looking at you, sizing you up. And this is the one time you know that there's somebody else going on that same date probably within the next hour. Like, how nerve-wracking is that? It's the worst experience ever, right? What compounds that stress, I feel, is not knowing and understanding the nuances of interviewing, right? So I feel like if someone deconstructs the process of interviewing, like, what are these questions? Why do they ask them? What are they expecting? What's the purpose? It will at least better prepare us. I think we just don't like walking into the unknown, and I'll say, even when we do understand what it's all about, sometimes the person that's interviewing, they're not in HR, so they're just winging it themselves, because not every company has sophisticated HR departments, right? So even with that, so even if you do prepare yourself, who's to say that that person on the other end is prepared themselves? And then how do you manage the interview when the interviewer is not well trained at interviewing, right? So the whole thing is just, a big mess. I suspect in years to come, this idea of interviewing and choosing someone, do I think AI is going to affect it? I do. I'll be honest with you. I do, because it's such an arduous process that, anytime things are monotonous and routine, technology is going to come in and change this whole thing. So I suspect they're going to find a way to change it. But at any rate, we're here, so let's work through it. So chapter 10 is going to talk a lot about preparing for that interview. Now, some of it is going to be things that you are familiar with. Others, you'll be like, oh, okay, I wasn't aware of that. So let's just demystify some of this. Now, we all know at some point we're going to be, invited to an interview. Yay, we love that, right? And we know that, they're going to ask us questions about what's on our resume, and plus ask us to explain things, maybe talk about ourselves a little bit. So we can expect that. But what tends to happen when that first initial call, is going to be very, very important. Let me first say this before we even get to that. My friends, and I'm guilty as charged. Probably everything I'm going to tell you is because I'm guilty as charged. Please make sure that when you are actively on the job search hunt, that you clear your voicemails. Am I the only one that had to clear a voicemail? I'm going to blame it on Florida 407. Anybody else have a 407 area code? When I lived in Jersey, I did not have this issue, but when I came down to Florida, and I'm from Florida, by the way, but I left like right out of high school. When I came back to Florida and I got a 407 number, I got a lot of spam calls. It must be, I don't know what it is with 407 numbers, but anybody else with a 407 number? And I just couldn't clear that stupid voicemail out enough, all these spam calls. And when I was on the job search hunt, I had people say, I'm trying to get a hold of you, but your voicemail box is full, so I am guilty as charged. I actually had to change my phone number. I'm like, man, what is up with this? Like, I don't remember ever getting this type of spam calls when I was up in Jersey. But when you are on the job search, like make sure your voicemail box is clear. Number two, make sure you're checking your emails frequently, right? I actually had to have someone text me because my box was full, and they're like, "Hey, I'm trying to get a hold of you. We want to interview you." Luckily, I got that job. But because that could have went south. The people are like, "Dang, she didn't even check her voicemail." And I'm like, I just can't keep the thing clean because no excuse. I just wasn't on my phone that much. But at any rate, like you're gonna want to make sure that that is done. And then secondly, if you're the type of person that you're so used to your friends or family members calling, be mindful that you're putting your phone number out there, you're putting the contact information out there, and people could call you for a job. So make sure you always answer properly. I've had that happen. Not that I answer rudely, but I had someone email me and, he was very inconspicuous about what he wanted. It was a college. And I don't know if I had inquired about that college. I think at the time I was trying to take some tech classes or something, but I may have applied to teach there as well. So I don't know what happened. And this is what happens when you put out so many resumes, right? I had to keep a spreadsheet of all the resumes I was putting out when I first came back home. And the guy reached out to me, and I wasn't really sure what he wanted. So I was like, maybe I was a bit short with him. And he was like, well, I was going to ask you, if you wanted to teach. And I was like, oh, because I thought he was trying to recruit me to take classes. You guys know how it is with those admissions people like stalking you to take class. I think I had just inquired about a class or something, so I thought it was admission stalker. So apparently I didn't, he didn't like my attitude, so don't be like me, so if you're actively looking for a job, make sure that, you have the right attitude, regardless if it's on the phone, email, whatever, how people are. So anyway, that has happened to me. Now, when you do interview, like I said, you're going to get some response. Typically, you're going to be involved in one or more of these different types of interviews. The first is a screening interview, and then followed up by either a structured or unstructured interview, and we'll talk about those, or you could even have both, which God forbid, right? But you could have all three of these types of interviews. So let's talk about each one. The screening interview is typically an informal interview designed to, just make sure you have the right skill set. Now, let me tell you this. Most times it is done by a recruiter. Very few times is it done by the hiring manager, even though the book talks about that. They are really just calling you and wanting to meet with you very briefly to make sure that what you put on your resume is what, coincides with what they need for that job. It is always a dead giveaway that it's a screening interview when you get someone that says they want to meet with you for 15 minutes, or, they send you an email and say that they're trying to block off a few minutes, 15 minutes, even sometimes 30 minutes, which it never goes 30 minutes. Ding, 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 that's just a screening interview. Why it's important for you to know it's just a screening interview? Number one, you don't want to get your hopes all up. I mean, it's a good thing to know that the recruiter is wanting to take your resume and pass it to the hiring manager, because a lot of times HR's job is to just, put out the advertisement, secure the position, the resumes, and then pass it on to the hiring manager, who's the one that's going to choose the resumes that, of the people they want to interview. So in essence, HR is doing that first quick screen, right? And even with that, they could be using the ATS system, and then they, download it and they call you and say, hey, we just want to, quickly double check. They may say something like, if they put out in the job description that the job is only paying X amount of dollars, which they'll do, and we'll talk about when you even talk about salary. But sometimes a company will be like, okay, this job starts at $20 an hour, like hard stop. And so they will say, oh, have you read the job description? This job start, is $20 an hour. And they want to make sure you know that before you even move forward, because they don't want you trying to negotiate differently. Secondly, again, they want to make sure, if the job is in a certain location, if the job requires you to, work weekends or whatever, nuanced thing, they want to make sure that you understand is what that screening interview is about. Most times it's done over the phone. Very rarely it's done video, because these HR people, they're going through a lot of people. They just trying to get in and get out. Now, I have had a few instances where the HR person is a bit long-winded and actually wanted to dig in. And I guess it just depends on what the mandate is from that hiring manager and how involved they want HR to be. But, for the most part, it's really just designed to check some boxes and to move you to the next level. Now, that does not mean that you cannot get some of your own questions answered. And when we talk about, this initial interview, a little bit later, I'll let you guys know what to ask that recruiter. Yeah, especially if they're a bit long-winded and they like to talk, the more you can get out of them. But at any rate, that is what this initial interview is about. Now, when you do move to the next level, and you have your first interview, it could be, what we call a structured interview. It's also known as a directive interview. And I'm going to say that is on a testable item. So make sure you're reading chapter 10 very carefully, guys. There's a lot of questions on your midterm about and from chapter 3. But this interview is called a directive interview. Now, most of this is what we are most familiar with. Formal interview process. A lot of times they have these predetermined questions that they're going to ask. Most of them, and these questions are broken down, and we'll go over those types of questions tomorrow, but they're broken down into different segments. And, they're designed to really, get a sense of your behavior and in different situations, right? It's the reason why they ask the same questions over and over to all the people is because they want to be able to compare apples to apples. So they want to see how you answer the question versus how someone else answered the questions. And then the questions do tend to go from being very general, and we'll talk about how to answer general questions, to more specific. But for now, just understand that these structured interviews are, very directive. Now, in these structured interviews, this is more like corporate type interviews. You may go to an office, sit in a conference room. It could be more than one person there. We call that a panel interview, and we'll discuss that later. But it's very structured, right? What we've come to expect. Now, unstructured interviews, they're not as formal, but they may or may not have like this whole laundry list of questions. They may be more, casual in nature, and like, don't get comfortable with unstructured interviews, guys, though, because this could mean they're paying more attention to what you're doing than versus what you're saying. In these types of environments, and some of you will probably have unstructured interviews, is where they do this like walkthrough of the work. Maybe they'll have you stick around for an hour, kind of see how you do things. Has anyone been told by their instructors whether they'll have like what they call a working interview or hands-on interview? Maybe with VA, they may have said to you guys, yeah, okay, see, Amanda, are you in the VA program? Exactly. Obviously working with animals, probably need a certain personality type for that, right? My daughter definitely would get hired. She runs away from everything, including lizards. But, they want to make sure that, you can handle it, right? Can you restrain animals? Do you, what are some of the things, Amanda, though? Because can you mind telling us why they want you guys to do a unstructured interview? What they're looking for? Did your instructor talk about that at all?
Well, I've never really had an unstructured interview with like a vet clinic or anything like that. I did, however, have one for a cleaning company.
Oh, really?
And pretty much they were just making sure that I was hitting all their key points that they wanted in our clients' houses. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's kind of like they are watching what you're doing.
Right. Not what you say, right? Yeah. And that is what happens, right? So I don't know if that's more unnerving or not. Like, I don't know how you guys feel about that. I don't know, maybe I prefer it. I'm like, yeah, you see what I got. If you don't like it, oh well. I don't know how I feel about that one. But also, in the welding and electrical, you guys too could have that, right? Has anybody else in the construction side of it, have you guys been told about unstructured interviews? Anybody in welding or HVAC or electrical? Just a quick thumbs up if you've been told. Yeah. Okay. I know for welders too, they'll be like, okay, I see people, yeah, unstructured, where, they, even from how you dress, and we'll talk about that later too, it could be unstructured. I guess that makes sense, in terms of they want to see that if you actually have the skills to do the work, that makes sense, right? In my line of work, actually, what's funny? Even in education, when I first started, some 23 years ago, we had unstructured interviews. It was an arduous process, guys. It took forever. Let me tell you something. The university that I went to go teach for, we had to go through, I think it was like a week-long interview, because not only did you have to interview, you had to interview with the dean, you had to interview with peers, you had to go through these, it was almost like a circuit. You guys, anybody that does like exercising, how you go through these circuits. So you went into one room and you had to do role play. You went into another room, you had to do a like a 5-minute presentation, like an educator. Like, let me tell you something. I went through the school of hard knocks to become a teacher. Y'all do not know. It was the best experience for me though, because it's like going through boot camp. So when I went through that university, and I'm just not mentioning them because I'm at this school now, but that school taught me how to teach. And we had a lot of training, right? I mean, it was my foundation. I worked for that school for like 11 years. And it taught me everything I know. And even when I went on to work at universities, even bigger than that, that training ground that I got taught me how to teach. And because some schools are they're I went when I taught in New York, for example, at I think it was Brooklyn College or Manhattan College. They're like, here's the syllabus, go find you a book, go teach. And I was teaching graduate international students. Can you imagine? So not all schools are equal, but some schools, some jobs have that. They put you through these present. Man, you don't even know. People think teaching is easy. It's not for the weak at heart. Like, some schools are it's like baptism by fire. But that's all right. That's all right. 23 years later, I think I got it down. But anyway, so you could have an unstructured interview. Typically, they will tell you, though, you'll get to know that from the screening. They'll say, okay, we want you to go to ABC place, and we'll talk about remote locations, and that's important. You may be thinking you're going to the corporate office, and they may send you out to a job site. So that's going to be important to know. That's why I always tell people, if you could just take the day off, take the day off or take the morning off or the afternoon off. I prefer afternoon interviews. That way, if I have to work in the morning, if you have a job, you just have that whole afternoon so you don't get stressed out, because you never know what that interview is about, right? But if you can find out as much as you can from that screening interview, the better. But when you go to these unstructured interviews, forget what I was about to say about that, but it could be offsite. I'll come back to it. I lost my train of thought on that. Now, when you do interview, right, particularly if it's going to be a structured interview, make sure you do your research, right? Do not go to anybody's company and not know about them. You should have visited their website. You should know their products and services, know who their competitors are too. Do a little bit of research, right? Look in the news to see if anything has come up about that company. A lot of companies have their own little news section on their website. Make sure you know what's going on. Maybe they got a new CEO. Maybe they just opened up a new division. Maybe they just got a new project, and that's why they're hiring. Like, you should know the company. It is going to come up in conversation. You won't ever show up at a person's company and not know it about that company. And we'll talk more about that. All right. When you are in the job interview, right, you want to stay focused. You want to stay focused. I'm saying that because a lot of interviewers, you don't know how to interview. And sometimes, you have to manage that interview. Remember, you have 1 hour with this person, maybe 2 hours if it's unstructured, and there's somebody else coming behind you. Don't let that interviewer mess up your interview. Has anybody ever been interviewed by somebody that just talks and talks and talks? And you're like, did they interview me or did I interview them? Anybody ever been in that situation? And let me tell you, Eva, okay, Erica says she has two. A lot of, let me tell you something. It is horrible because you know what happens? Oftentimes, this long winded person, they're just running their mouths, and then they're not going to remember you because they're so busy talking. And at the end of the day, most times these people, unless they're the hiring manager, which most times they're not, they have to go and debrief the top person. And they may remember one or two things about you because they've spent their whole time running their mouths. And then if they have to recommend someone, they're just going to wing it. Like, I hate those people that don't really know how to interview. They just talk all over the place. And so what you have to do, and we'll dig into this all week, is manage that person. Like, don't allow them, if they're going off topic, refocus that conversation back to the question that's being asked. You can be polite, but be direct. Make sure that you get your hour because somebody else is going to come in behind you. And you don't want that person to manage this long-winded person better. And the person remembers them more because they were able to talk more. But that's why you want to keep that focus, even if the person goes off topic or tries to engage in this conversation. And a lot of times people do that just because they're nervous. The interviewer is nervous too. They don't know you, right? They may try to talk about sports or something light, and that's nice and fun. And like I said, be polite but stay on topic, right? Like, this is your opportunity to let them know who you are, and you don't have a lot of time to sit and talk about food recipes, right? um if the interview is in person, most of them will be, like I said, it could be at a remote location. Make sure you get the address. This is something that you can ask the screener, right? We were talking about earlier. What can I ask the screener? One thing you can ask the screener, make sure you know where the location is. They could just assume, or they may forget. Again, these are people. I would love to say everybody's professional, but it's not the case. These people are talking to a lot of different people. They may forget to tell you the address of where you're going. Something else that you want to remember to get is the person's first and last name that you're going to talk to. That don't let them just tell you, oh, Sam or Scott or Mr. Smith. There could be more than one Sam, Scott, or Mr. Smiths. Like, make sure you get the person's first and last name. And the other reason why you're going to do it is because you're going to send up a follow-up thank you note to them too. So it's important that you get their first and last name. And something else that you're going to do, you're going to do your research on the person that's interviewing you. So that's another reason why you want their first and last name, but they don't need to know all that. But make sure that you know the location and make sure that you know who you're going to talk to, first and last name. Now, in a structured interview, it could be more than one person that you're interviewing. Has anyone ever had a structured interview before? I mean, a panel interview before? Some people like it, some people don't like it. I mean, I like it because I'm like, let's get it over with, right? I don't want to come back for this twice, right? Who wants to keep coming back for them, right? Okay, I see a couple of amens in the audience. And it could be good because typically if it's more than one person, it's either your supervisor and a coworker or your supervisor and a manager. Sometimes it's the supervisor and HR. Sometimes it could be cross sectional. It could be like your department and somebody from another department. I know when I worked in finance, I got interviewed by the marketing department, the finance department, and HR, and it was because and it was the development department. It was nonprofit because I had to work very closely with them, and so that's how I was interviewed. So you never know, right? And it was a panel interview. I've sat on a lot of panel interviews. Typically, the higher the position, the more you're going to be on panel interviews. I remember when one company was hiring a CEO, and it was like 15 of us around the table interviewing the CEO, right? And that's just how the company did it, right? Can you talk about nerve-wracking? But hey, more money, more problems, right? And it's good. Now, I like it. I don't know if I like it. I guess I like it more because I feel like I would rather have three people have my fate in their hand than one person. Because if it's just one person, then you're really at that person's mercy. But if it's three, then I feel like I got a better shot. I don't know. Who prefer one person? Give me a thumbs up if you just prefer one person. Okay, Avatar. They say you got time for all those personalities, right? Give me a thumbs up if you. Okay, I see. If you prefer a panel, give me a thumbs up. I'm just curious. Okay, okay, yeah. Okay, so even split, even split. You know, the only upside too is the panel is that you don't have to come back, right? You know, it's like I don't want to have to, please this one and I got to come back again and please that one and please another one. Let me just get it out of the way. But some other people may argue, well, you only get one time to make a good first impression. What if you're off your game the first time, right? So that that can go either way. But if it is a panel interview, typically that's what it looks like. The beneficial thing is that you get to see more people, you get to know, and it also gives you an idea if it's somewhere you want to work, right? If you're meeting these people, you're like, ooh, this place seems a little cray-cray. No, thank you, right? I'm kind of glad I met everyone. All right. So that is what that is about. Like I said, we're going to dig into the questions. That's going to be a big deal tomorrow, guys. So make sure you're reading chapter 10, rather, because we're going to deconstruct all those different types of questions, why they're asking, what it's about, how do you answer them. It's going to be a little heavier than today. So I want to make sure that you are reading chapter 10 so we can get started on that. But for today, here's what I want to know with your conference question. And let me say this. Now, I see a lot of people didn't do my conference question yesterday. Was that question too difficult to do? I just want to know. Let me just ask. Because some of y'all did not do my conference question yesterday. I was in my feelings. I got my feelings hurt. Y'all just didn't get to it. Was it too difficult? All right, nobody wants to say it. All right, that's all right. Here we go. Here is the conference for today. This should be an easier one. What is your most hated interview question and why? What is your most hated interview question and why? I probably already know, and we're going to be talking about it tomorrow, but I know mine is tell me about yourself. Anybody else? Tell me about yourself. Go ahead, Eva.
I had a question about sorry, it was the worst interview ever in the modules. There's no way to submit it through text. How did you want us to do that one?
No, it's submitted through text. Let me see real quick.
Yeah, it's not like giving the option.
All right. Go ahead and write this down while you guys are doing that. Let me double check that right now. Any other questions before I stop the
No, thank you.
recording? Yeah, hang tight on that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording then. And I'll take care of that for you.